got the weight of the world pressing down against my shoulders. I got ice on my wrist that doesn't bring me any closer. I got fear in my mind, feeling like a constant drip in the chaos and the bliss. You can handle this. I got lies about myself that I wear like tattoo sleeves. Anxiety I can't control, I can't even breathe. Working hard to make a life for a family that I miss. Never home to say goodnight. You can handle this. Switch. When I feel like I'm on cloud nine and no one shoot me out of the sky, caught up just releases empty highs to forget the fact I'm gonna die. I hold on to false control with the tightest grip, but I can't save my soul. You can't handle this.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to part 5 of You Can't Handle This. We have actually made a decision as a church to call it audible. Considering everything that's happening in and around our nation right now, we felt the need to address what's happening. We felt like if we didn't address it, it would almost come across as though we were a little bit tone deaf. And so as a church, we run towards issues. We don't run away from issues. And so we're going to tackle this today. And so I have an amazing group of friends here with me that are going to help me to tackle this situation. Now, I want you to know this. At the end of this, we will not have solved all of the world's problems. But hopefully we're able to touch on some of the things that maybe you're feeling right now in your heart. Hopefully we're able to answer some questions maybe that you've had recently about everything that's happening. And so my prayer is that this would be an amazing conversation. Now, we threw this in the You Can't Handle This series because the reality is racism is something that we just can't handle, right? It's something that literally we've seen on the news that literally has huge ramifications. And if we don't get this thing right, unfortunately, there are people that will lose their lives. And so it's our goal to make sure that as a church that we do everything we possibly can to not only reestablish unity in our country, but to have a voice in making that happen. And so I want to introduce you to some really, really cool people that I have here today with me, and they're going to help me as we go through this together. So what I want to do is I want to open us up in prayer, and then we're going to get started. Jesus, thank you so much for bringing us all here today, Lord. I pray that this would be an amazing conversation, God, an open dialogue about everything that's happening in and around our nation. God, I pray that this would not be politically correct, that we would not hold back, but that we would have a raw conversation about something that our country has been dealing with for the last 400 years, and that right now, I believe we're on the verge of changing. And so, God, I pray that this will be a blessed conversation. Holy Spirit, have your way. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, the first thing I wanted to start out with was by talking a little bit about what your experience has been. The reality is that everyone has a different experience with race. Whether you are white, black, Hispanic, Asian, everyone has a different experience with race in America. And even within each one of those groups, different people have different experiences. And so I'm just interested in kind of knowing a little bit about what your personal experience has been with race in America.
So for me, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. My immediate family we all look white, but my dad's actually Dominican and my mom's from Spain. So my extended family is a mixed color. We're all mixed. And I think as a child, I never really saw it. We were all just one big family and we all loved each other. But my first true experience was, I was 16, just got my first job. And I was going for my first raise and we had to meet with the head manager to go over our review. And during the review process, he was kind of looking at my name and he saw my last name and he was like, Reynoso. He's like, what nationality are you? Where are you from? So I started telling him and he kind of stopped me and was like, it kind of sounds Italian to me. Why don't we just go with that? So that was kind of his way of like not even wanting to hear who I was.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't really I just know that memory stayed with me. I didn't really resonate what was happening in the moment, but it stayed with me. And for the first time, I kind of felt a little bit of shame in who I was.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, almost like who you were was just invalidated by him in that one short statement.
He didn't want to hear about it.
Wow. What about you guys? What's your experience with race, Pam?
I mean, I would definitely say that racism has been real. Growing up in Jamaica, I didn't really experience racism like that. But when I came to America, it was a different awakening. Now, because of the way I look, make it worse, my hairstyle is locked. You know, the perception is, oh, you know, are you hoodlum? Oh my God, are you a criminal? You know, before even having that conversation of talking to me. And I remember working at the resort a couple years back. I was a receptionist. An older white gentleman came in. He blew into a Kleenex, threw it at my station with the expectation that I was supposed to pick it up, and I was so taken back by that.
Wow.
I immediately went to my manager and said, this is unacceptable. So he spoke to the gentleman, you know, and kind of calmed down the situation, but I was really taken back by that.
Yeah. I think oftentimes when it comes to the whole race conversation, there are so many people that are so hurting and broken themselves. Racism is almost just a manifestation of their own brokenness on the inside. And I think a man who would do something like that speaks to a high degree of brokenness.
Gosh. So I grew up in a very close-knit family, in a close-knit community. We were migrant farmers, which meant that we traveled the eastern coast, just about every state from here to New York, harvesting different crops. Well, there were different people who went along with us on those travels. So for me, it wasn't so much about race. I mean, I was aware of race because there were different ethnicities of people who traveled with us, Hispanic, Latinos, you know, Haitian, I mean, just a slew of different backgrounds. But what stood out to me at an early age was the disparities in economics, the difference in economics. And I grew up thinking, because I saw, just by the way that we were raised and being on the farms, the harvest, I thought that black people were supposed to be poor, that all black people were poor, and that's just the way it was, and all white people were rich, and that's just the way it was. And I can remember consciously in middle school making a decision not to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I would stand, but I would not repeat the words, and 2 reasons. One was because I just not understanding the symbolism, and I thought to myself, why are we pledging to a flag? And then the second reason was I was really internalizing, like I said, even at that early age, why am I pledging allegiance to a country that treats people differently based upon their skin color? And so for me, at that, like I said, that early age, and even now as an adult, I mean, you know, people, I'm sure somebody's going to comment about it, but to this day, I do not pledge allegiance to the flag. I'll stand out of respect for other people around me, but I will not pledge allegiance to the flag. So, I grew up with this understanding that in order to be successful, according to my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles who raised me, my mom, you know, we had to be 2 times, 3 times better than the white person in order to even be, not even on an equal platform, just to kind of even be in the ballpark field, right? And so I just remember thinking, if I got to do all of that, if I got to work this hard, you know, who defines success for me? And is it really fair that I'm, you know, measured by a system that really is not part of my daily existence?
You know, so many people, even maybe some people that are watching, have this hard time understanding that there are minorities in America that feel like second-class citizens, right? And so they're like, well, why won't you stand for the flag? Why? That doesn't make any sense. When the reality is, if you feel like you're a second-class citizen, you're not going to do first-class citizen things, right? So that kind of brings me to my second question, which is, there are a lot of people out there that would say, hey, this is all made up. Right? People of color are making up racial bias. They're making up this idea of discrimination. Maybe that existed back in the 1960s, but it definitely doesn't exist today. What would you say to people that would say that minorities are just whining, they just need to get over it and move forward? What would you say to those people?
I would say, the persecution of 12-year-old George Sidney was not made up. He died because of an innocent statement. An innocent statement. Philando Castile is not made up.
Yeah.
He died reaching for his driver's license. George Floyd is not made up. His life cost him $20. And when I think about it, when I think about the existence of God, a lot of people will deny his existence because they can't see him. And I feel like just because we cannot tangibly touch it, or you fail to deny that racism exists, it doesn't denote the existence of what people are facing. Unfortunately, our history speaks for itself.
Yeah.
That there were times, many times, where Black lives did not matter. And I kind of feel like, how can we, if we're going to be at the state in our life to denote that racism exists, that means that we're blindly walking in life.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that there are so many people out there that feel like, well, hey, it doesn't exist because I say it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But just because, like you said, just because you say it doesn't exist doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? You're even seeing where in DC, there are people saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Well, for me, I think that there's two answers to that question. I think the very first basic answer is that there's just a lot of people that have not endured racism, so they don't have the life experiences to actually believe that this is true. And the second answer is I think some people know that it is true, but they harbor senses of guilt from their own personal bias. So they're unwilling to admit that the racism is real, because if so, then they have to really look at the convictions within their own heart and do some soul searching to ask themselves why they were biased when they see specific skin colors. I mean, I look on the internet and there is a plethora of knowledge and resources and statistical data that shows there are racial disparities, and that there are systems that are flawed within our current system that kind of hold back and oppress people of color. So I just think for me personally, I would just suggest to maybe check the sources if you see any information that's floating out there that doesn't go in alignment with saying that there is racism, because it is real and people experience it day to day.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel in this scenario, those people, you don't say anything to those people. Okay? And the reason you don't say anything to those people is because those people are choosing not to educate themselves. Building upon what you're saying. It's not that, in the 70s, Richard Nixon put in place the war on drugs, which he went after opioids and he went after marijuana. The marijuana was for the hippies, the opioids were pushed directly towards the Black community. We got arrested, we went to jail. In this day and age, we get treatment. Where's the opioids hitting hardest now? We're getting treatment now. Okay. So we move into the 80s and we had Ronald Reagan, who magnified and just intensified the war on drugs to where they were pushing crack into the Black community intentionally for by the CIA in order to fund a war in Nicaragua. They pushed it against the Black community, which in turn destroyed our homes, destroyed our families, and put us into a bad situation to where when they're saying, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get out of it. But how can I do that? How can many of us do that when young men of color do not have fathers in their home because you systematically oppressed us to put us in jail? It's hard. So you don't have that conversation because you're choosing not to do it. We move into the 90s and then we have Bill Clinton, who now is doing the crime bill. Well, guess what? We are disproportionately being locked up, put into a new form of slavery because corporations will now go to the jail system and use the jail system as free labor. The 13th Amendment basically allows that to happen. And again, you don't see that, so I don't have a conversation with you. The only thing I can do is pray.
Absolutely.
Pray for you and ask you to pray with me, so that you get some sort of vision and some sort of light to see what's really happening in this world if you choose not to believe it. And that's the hardest part. That is extremely hard.
There is a huge discrepancy between how drugs in the Black community, how people who use drugs was labeled in the 1980s versus now. Now with methamphetamines, like you said, it's, oh, well, they need treatment.
It's a sickness.
It's a sickness. There's a disease. But in the 1980s, it wasn't a disease. It was criminal behavior. You're so true. So true. So true.
Yeah, I think also what Harris's point, the second one about the self-awareness, I think is just so big. And for me, that's something that's exposed my racial biases, because I think we all carry something. So I look at it this way though. We have to help ourselves before we can help others. So when we all board a plane, you know, what's the first thing? They go for the safety, and they talk about the oxygen mask, if the, you know, if we need to put them for low, you know, low pressure. And the first thing they tell you is put it on yourself first, and then help others. So I applied it to myself, and I said, well, I have to look inward before I can go out. So last year I read a book, The Third Option by Miles McPherson, and it was, to me, it was a game changer, eye opener. And it exposed to me my own racial biases that I had to pray about and really like harness in. But I had blind spots. I had blinders on, things that I said, oh no, I would never do that, or I would never think that way. But when I started internalizing what he was saying about blind spots, I realized that yes, I did. And I knew that in that moment that I had to dig deep within myself to see what I was thinking in order to help others. You know, so I think education really, like you said, there's so many sources out there, you know, that can help. Because I think without being educated, you can't go forward in the mission.
Absolutely,
you know?
that's something that we're actually going to talk about in a later question. You know, with everything happening around our country, I almost sense that something's happening, right? Something different from anything I think our country has ever experienced. And so the question I have for you guys is, I almost feel like there's a movement happening. Do you sense that, or is that just me?
There's a movement. There's definitely a movement happening right now. A lot of people, especially people of color, we are tired. We're tired of being tired. We are not just looking for only the Civil Rights Act that happened in the 1960s. We're looking for true equality. Equality in everything that we do when it comes to jobs, equality of how we're being treated by the police. Just, we want a seat at the table. You know, we're tired of our culture being monetized, and then not seeing any of those, that input going back into our communities. Okay? We're not getting anything out of it, but yet hip hop is the biggest music genre. The way fashion moves, it's typically coming out of the African American or people of color communities. It could be Latin, African American, wherever, it's coming out of those communities. And we see nothing from it. We're tired. There is a movement happening, and we need to see that change. Absolutely. We need to see it ASAP. So good.
Yeah, I agree also. I agree with what Elijah said, but I also think that you know, there is definitely a movement, but we need to make sure that we're stepping up and confronting it. We need to make sure that we're speaking up. I think that a lot of people see what's going on as a negative thing, and I kind of see it as it's an opportunity for us to step into the next season. It's an opportunity for us to grow, not, you know, if we stay complacent and stay where we're at right now, then who knows when we're going to get another opportunity like this.
That's so good.
So I truly think that it's definitely a movement, but it's a movement that we can't just sit back and just see what other people are doing. We all got to step up and be part of the movement.
Absolutely. You know, oftentimes people will say, well, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Oh, this one is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Most people have never seen something like this in their entire lifetime, and there's a good chance that we will never in our lifetime see this ever again. And so I think we all have to be smart about what we do in this season to help create change, help to make sure that change happens.
The movement also that I see, I mean, kind of say that we step into it, is the younger generation, the current generation who has really built into social media, okay? They are speaking their voices. I'm seeing a lot of videos of suburban white kids confronting their parents and actually hitting their parents with facts, not statistics, but actual facts, and making the parents realize what they're looking at. I have a lot of hope for this generation coming up that through this movement, we are going to see change in the fact that the color of your skin is not going to matter anymore. And these kids are really showing that. They're saying this is not fair. This is not how it should be, and this is not how we're going to proceed forward. You know, it's amazing. You know, like I feel a lot of hope in that for my kids. I really do see a lot of hope in my kids that they recognize it.
Absolutely.
And no, the old saying is if you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it. I don't want them to forget it. I really don't. I want them to recognize what it is, how it's wrong, and not repeat the cycle. Break the cycle. Don't go back to it. Don't do what our parents did, my grandparents did, what we fell into. You know, I mean, even though we had the yes, we are one, we are the world. That's the generation I'm from, the we are the world generation.
Yeah.
But yet we still see the same racism that we saw in the '60s. It's just under the rug right now. You know what I mean? It's behind closed doors, and COVID-19 and being able to sit stable has really pulled that umbrella off of it.
Absolutely.
So this movement, these kids are gonna take us where we need to go.
Yeah, I read a book that talked about the fact that racism is like the foundation to a house, and then what racism looks like in any given generation is like the walls. So one generation, the wall might be slavery, then that gets torn down. Then we put up another wall called Jim Crow, then that gets torn down. Now we put up another wall called police brutality. We're going to eventually tear that down. If we don't deal with the foundation,
Yes.
the house will continue to just build new walls. So I agree with that 100%. So with everything happening around our country, I think we've got to talk a little bit about measurables, like what would a good outcome be, right? What would a good outcome, if you can explain for those that are watching, what would a good outcome look like when it comes to the protesting and everything that's happening? What would a good outcome look like?
That's a good question. I think it would look like change in the system, right? And to do this, I think we have to go way back. We have to go back to the beginning, almost like what you were just saying before about the foundation. It's going back to 1619. And some people would even say before that, that Africans were brought to the continent. But either way, the fact is this, is that we have to go back and I think tear up and uproot a systemic system that was purposely, strategically designed to get us right in this moment, right where we are now. Through all the things that we've experienced as people of color, to get us to this moment. And I think before we can do anything, that we have to go back and we need to address that first. In addressing that, though, I think also what needs to happen. When I was in education, we had this saying that in order to change the organization, you had to expect. In order to expect something different, you had to inspect it first. So expect change, you have to inspect for that change, right? So I think we're at a place where, in terms of expecting and inspecting, we got to look at the systems, right? And look at the political systems and be more involved in the local processes and political systems. We need to know who these people are that are sitting on our local boards, on our local councils. You know, what are they supporting?
Yeah.
What are they not supporting? Right? I think we need to look at these judges. I think sometimes we're just going down the ballot, just circling in. You know, whether we're Democrat or Republican or independent, and we're not considering what sentences that they've issued. You know, based on race or ethnicity or economics. So I think we need to look at our law enforcement structures and systems, looking at what the value systems are and what they value and what evidence do we have that they line up with us morally and ethically.
Yeah.
And when we find that they don't, then I think it's upon us, it's our duty to do something about
Absolutely.
it. To do something.
We've got to hold our leaders accountable, right? I think for so long we in November we check it off and then we don't come back to it again until that 2 years from now, 4 years from now, when it's time to vote again.
Yeah.
I think we have to hold our leaders accountable when they get in office.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, that's so good on what you said. The way I look at it is like, this is a war, all right? And within a war, there's several little small strategic battles, right? And so right now we've opened up the dialogue to be able to start having these conversations. And for me, the best outcome that can come out of this is that we begin to rise up and have uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
Like we said, that we all, whether or not we like to admit it, we have certain biases within us. First, we need to go inside and look at those biases and be willing to say, hey, what is the root of this? And how can I do something different going forward from this point, right? So these are just small steps that we could take, small battles that we can conquer and win within ourselves, and then overall together, we work together in unity to be able to defeat this, like this war on racism, you know?
So good, so good. So in scripture, the word says in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 8 through 9, speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. In light of that scripture, what would you say is the role of the church in this season? Like, does the church have a responsibility to help create change, or would you say the church needs to take more of a passive role in this situation? What would you say?
I definitely feel that churches shouldn't be afraid or intimidated to talk about racism or to talk about the history of Black people. At the end of the day, you know, God orchestrated that church is supposed to be the platform, the right platform to unite bodies, unite cultures, to unite races. So we cannot be silent when it comes to this topic.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So good. You know, I agree with you guys 100%. The church has to speak up about situations like this. In fact, I would argue the church has to take lead. Right now, my biggest fear is that the church isn't leading. The church is showing up late to the party, right?
They're being reactive instead of proactive.
They're being reactive, and I find that the world is actually taking the lead right now because the church refused to take the lead, and now the church is jumping on the bandwagon. My hope is that throughout this whole process of everything that's happening, that the church will step up and take its rightful role in this and lead America through this. So, Karis, this week I was scrolling through social media and I noticed that you, on a post, you talked about some things that you're doing to educate yourself about everything that's happening in our country. And the thing that really stood out to me about your post was you mentioned to folks that were reading it that you did not want them to respond unless they were willing to reference what resources they were using to educate themselves about the topic. That like blew my mind, right? Why did you structure the question in that way? Or why did you structure the post in that way?
Well, first I want to put that, you know, the way that I worded the post, I really, first of all, I prayed about it before I posted it. And
that's important.
Yeah, it is. And I wanted to structure it in a way that they, that people that read the post didn't feel like I was baiting them in for an argument. What I'm really trying to do is get to the heart of it, and getting to the heart of it means that we have to have a dialogue. We need to be able to converse, right? And just from my own personal experiences, I know that there are times in the past, you know, humbly that I admit, that I read information that was false. And not because of the actual, the report itself was false, because the way that the data, the way the data was collected, it wasn't an actual representation of the reality that some people face in America, right? So as my search for truth has has taken its journey, I have learned that a lot of times we form our opinions, or we base our research based off of our opinions. So if I already have a bias in my mind, when I go to the computer and I type something up, I'm typically going to put something that's going to lean towards to further prove my point, right? So when I structured my posts on social media, what I wanted to do is, first of all, I'm open to learn. So if you have some resources, some sources that show something different than what I have read, then I'm willing to hear. I'm probably going to check to see whether or not it comes from a biased source, but I want to hear. I want to be able to listen, and I do believe that when I open up the floor to say, hey, you know, you have a voice and you have opinions, also tell me what your opinions are, and then that would give them the opportunity to feel comfortable enough that I can then have an entryway to express my opinion and shed some light as to, hey, this is the research I've done and this is what supports it, you know. So I just wanted them to not feel like they were being baited, but to understand that I just want to enter into a dialogue with them, so that once this dialogue happens, that's where change can begin to take place.
That's so good. I have a close friend of mine, another white pastor, and we were having a conversation about race in America. And he had mentioned, he said, man, as a white man, I just feel like blacks won't allow me to have an opinion about race in America. And I told him, I said, no. We want you to have an opinion. We just want you to have an educated opinion.
Absolutely.
And the problem is that there are so many people that have all of these opinions, not based upon anything substantive that they've actually read, but because mama told them that, grandmama told them that, or they watch something on television and they say, oh, that must be it. And so I think the reality is, I think we all have to get educated about this. Black, white, Hispanic, we have to get educated about what's happening so that we can speak intelligently about this situation and not just give a bunch of opinions.
I want to add on to that also. What I notice, even just within my own friend circle, a lot of times people are going based off of opinion only, and they've not taken any time to do any research. And I understand everyone's perception shapes their realities, but I'm challenging my friends, my family members out there that might feel that racism and discrimination aren't real. Well, take some time, do some research, have some real tough conversations with people, and then tell me what you feel about it.
Absolutely. I think that cross-referencing is a lost art. Right? Oftentimes we go straight to one article and it's like, well, it is what it is because the article said it. We don't cross-reference our news, right? So if we watch MSNBC, we watch only MSNBC. If we watch Fox News, we only watch Fox News. I think we've got to get back to the things we all learned in elementary school. Right? We got to read. Reading is necessary. We have to educate ourselves in this situation.
And look at the source where the data comes from.
Absolutely.
Make sure that it's not a biased source. And I mean, I'm okay. You want to read something liberal, that's fine. You want to read something conservative, that's fine. And then form your opinion somewhere in the middle. But just make sure you're not leaning to one side. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have to look at technology in that aspect as well, especially on the social media side. When you're on social media and the friends that you follow, everything eventually starts being geared towards your opinion. And everybody that's associated with you has the same exact opinion. And it's hard to break outside of that bubble because you don't have friends on your list that have a different opinion. So nothing is getting fed to you.
Yes.
We have technology in our homes. I'm sorry to tell you people, it is listening. It hears everything you say. If you say something, then an advertisement pops up. So you have to remember when those ads are being geared towards you, it shows up. It will continue to show up, and it was again molded. So you're right. We have to cross-reference. You have to watch Fox News. You have to watch CNN. You have to watch MSNBC, and then you take what they said that was alike. There's your truth.
Yes.
The minute it strays off different, that's not true. Okay, it's not true at that point in time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff. So at its core, this is a very real spiritual battle that we're in. Racism is a spirit. It's a bad spirit, right? And so in light of that, the question I have for you is, why do you think justice brings a smile to the face of God? Like, why do you think when there's justice in the earth realm, God looks upon that with a smile on his face?
So, but I think that because we were made in his image. We were made to love and to be loved. So to me, injustice just doesn't feed love. It can never feed it. So we have to love people in order to have Jesus smiling on us, you know? And I read something the other day that said that nothing that we do in our life will ever matter unless it's from loving God and loving all his people. And to me, that just summed everything up. That's what we need to do, is just love one another, everybody the same, and there will be no injustice.
That's so good.
You know, to piggyback on that, what I love when Paul said in Galatians 5:38, when he said that there's neither Jew or Gentile, there's neither slave or free, male or female, that we're just all one, right, in Jesus Christ. What I love about that and what you just said is that we're created in his image, and that he doesn't favor any one of us, right? He loves all of us. And so in that, I think that, or I know that there's just one God, right? There's one love, and there's one justice. And justice in this sense, to me, is really three-dimensional. It touches on something that you just said. It's being in the right relationship with God, being in the right relationship with one another, and being in the right relationship with creation. And so from that perspective, I really think when we get that right, that brings a smile to God's face.
You know, so I think it brings a smile to his face because I thought about it as they were speaking, and God is justice. Ever since the beginning, from the garden, he's been trying to bring us back. As humans, we get to make our own decisions. He gives us that opportunity to choose life or death. And when people choose death, it's God's job, in a sense, to bring vindication for that other person that's been harmed. So I think that in that sense, he's reacting to our reactions, our situations that we put ourselves in. He's just reacting to that. So he is justice. He is, what they're talking about, love, and he wants to come across that way as love, but he does also have to protect his children too and vindicate them as well.
To kind of play off what you're saying, I go back to the Word of God and the foundational truths, right? God is good, sin is bad, and God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And if you really dig into the Bible and you look at it, there are systems that God has put into place since back in the garden for justice, right? You look back at the original sin with Adam and Eve, and then that was the first slaying of an animal to cover their sin, right? And then you look back at the beautiful portrait of Jesus Christ, and God is a good father, and there was sin and inequity, and something needed to pay the price for that sin. And he sent his holy son in order to cover that sin. Because God was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, is still seeking that justice. Because that's just who he is. And he loved us and created us for a relationship. So he knew that in order to reconcile that relationship and to cover those sins, he needed to send his precious son. So I think when you look at it and you look at racism and the heart behind it and the division that it causes, what it does is separates us from our Creator. And we're created for a relationship with him. And so when he sees racism and division, it pains his heart, it hurts him, because that's not what we were created for. So I just think that when we are, as Christians and as believers and as the church, have the take the stance against some of these issues that we're facing today, we are pleasing God. And we are bringing a smile to his face, and we're doing the things that Jesus Christ has done himself. He would have spoke against this injustice. And as a church, I just challenge us to do better.
Absolutely. In a message a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that when Christ died on the cross, not only did he reconnect man to God, but he also reconnected man to man. That's true reconciliation. And when we have racism builds a wall between man and man. And so I would say that the thing that brings God, the reason why justice in this situation brings a smile to God's face is because it removes the wall between man and man. I think also you guys talked about image, the image that exists on the inside of each one of us. The Bible talks about God breathed life into Adam. And so that was, his image was placed on the inside of Adam. And so one of the things that I couldn't help but think about was the fact that when we dishonor one another through racism, what we're actually doing is we're dishonoring the God image on the inside of each and every one of us. And so my prayer would be for, not only for our church, but for the entire world, that we would remove the barriers, remove the walls, but then that we would also honor God's image on the inside of every human being across our globe. So I think there's like 7 billion human beings on our globe, and there's 7 billion people walking around with the image of God on the inside of them. So, hey guys, I want to thank you so much for being a part of today's conversation. I truly believe it's going to bless somebody who's watching today. Those of you that are out there watching, I want you to know we don't have all of the answers to this. This is a really big issue. One of the things we were talking about before we got set up today was the fact that racism is an institution that took 400 years to be established, and it's not going to be torn down overnight. But I believe that if we all take one little step, when we look back on this decades from now, we will be night and day from where we're at today as a nation. Hey, I want you to know, church, that we love you. There are a couple of next steps that we have for you that we'd like for you to consider stepping into. Some of you, you've been watching us for the past several months on Facebook, and maybe the Lord is telling you that now is your time to join our team. We want you to jump on and be a part of everything that God is doing. If you like these people that I sat here and had a conversation with today, I want you to know that they are all a part of expansion groups. Every Monday night, we have expansion groups via Zoom, 7 p.m. We want you to be a part of it. All you need to do is put something in the comment section, let one of our team members know, and they'll get you plugged in. Or you can fill out a Connect card. Just get in touch with us. We will help you get plugged in to one of our groups. Hey, family, listen, I want you to know, as your pastor, I'm praying for you. I'm believing God's best for your life. I'm believing that this season is an amazing opportunity for change to be made. Just know this, when everything around us seems like it's falling apart, things just might be falling together. And I believe that things are falling together. We're going to continue as a church to lean into this. We are not tone deaf. We will see this through the end. And I want you to know that as a church, we're committed to seeing this all the way through. Love you. Take care. Have a blessed day.